Welcome, everybody. We're live now. Please note that the session is going to be recorded and will be made available to everyone after the event. So a big thank you to our audience for joining us today from wherever you may be in the world. We have a great session planned for the day on global data privacy, a technology perspective. And this is a virtual roundtable with CEOs and CIOs. My name is Rahyab Lari. I'm a director at the World Bank, and I will be moderating today's session. It's my pleasure and privilege to be able to introduce to you our speakers for today's session. First, we have Deni Robitaille, a Vice President and the World Bank Group's Chief Information Officer. We also have with us Tami, who is the World Bank's Chief Data Privacy Officer. And we have Kabir Barday, the Chief Executive Officer of OneTrust. Amit, the Chief Executive Officer of Informatica. Felix Maele, the CEO of Collibra. Kwok, the Director of Information Technology at the International Finance Corporation. And Claire Lin, who is the World Bank Group's Chief Information Security Officer. And I would like to just get right down to it. We have a packed agenda, so I'm going to invite my colleague, Kwok, to provide the opening remarks for today's event. Thank you. Kwok, over to you.
Good afternoon. Hope everyone can hear everyone. So on behalf of the World Bank Group, I would like to welcome all the panelists for this session and all the participants who have dialed in. A very quick introduction of myself, which Rahyab already said. My name is Kwok. I joined the World Bank Group in November 2019 as a CIO and Director of Corporate Information and Technology for IFC. And prior to that, I held various IT positions in the private sector, based predominantly in Hong Kong. On the 28th of January 2020, which is the same day last year, the World Bank Group commemorated the 1981 signing of the first legally binding international treaty dealing with privacy and data protection. So this is the second year we are recognizing the Data Privacy Day through this event, with the intention to raise awareness within the World Bank Group about the importance of data privacy. And for your information, the privacy policy will become effective in the World Bank Group starting from next Monday, February the 1st. As much as data privacy is the in thing right now, it really wasn't the case that long ago when it was rather ignored. And coming from Hong Kong, let me share the situation before data privacy was taken seriously. All Hong Kong residents have an ID card, and by law, you have to carry that card every time you leave the house. And otherwise, you could be arrested. So what it means is, every time the norm was, every time you went somewhere to register for a new service, be it your visit with a doctor or a dentist, or even going to a beauty salon for your first treatment, beauty treatment, they will collect from you on the registration form, your name, your Hong Kong ID number, your full date of birth. And if you don't provide them, you could be denied service. But with these three pieces of information, even over the phone, you can actually transfer money from one account to another. You can close bank account. But yet such important personal information was readily collected and recorded on forms that might subsequently be filed or kept in open spaces. But back then, nobody really cared. But thanks to data privacy and protection law, later on, the collection of such data was no longer allowed. So while the awareness of data privacy has implications on everyday life, the implications on organizations are even more significant. So here at the World Bank Group, just like many other organizations, we handle and we process large volume of personal data to carry out our development mandate and to serve our twin goals of reducing extreme poverty and promoting shared prosperity. The technology implication of data privacy is profound, because organizations increasingly rely heavily on technology innovation to help us achieve the data protection mandate. So in our panel today, we're excited to have with us technology leaders to discuss the role of technology and innovation to help enable a stronger data privacy program in organizations. And I look forward to hearing the insights. So without further ado, I hand it back to my beloved colleague Rahyab to present to you our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kwok, for those opening remarks. So we're going to get right down to introducing our panel, beginning with Deni. Deni?
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Nice meeting you. I'm Deni Robitaille. I'm the World Bank Group CIO. Our role, the IT function in the World Bank Group, is to provide technology services to the entire organization. So the World Bank, IFC, MEGA. So it's a very exciting role. I've spent now more than 20 years in this organization, working in operation, transport, governance, and many managerial roles. And I have had the pleasure to work in the IT world as a CIO for the last 4 years, supported by a great bunch of colleagues, very competent. So very happy to be here for this important discussion on data privacy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deni. So Tami, perhaps we could hear from you next.
Sure, thank you, Rahyab. My name is Tami Dokken. I am the Chief Data Privacy Officer for the World Bank. I joined the bank in March of 2019 from the private sector and joined for the purpose of rolling out the bank's privacy policy. So we've adopted, as was mentioned, our first data privacy policy. It becomes effective on Monday. My team has been working with the bank and partners throughout the bank to do gap analyses, to look for ways to improve processes, and look for opportunities to raise awareness of data privacy, and in particular, the privacy policy and what it means. We work closely with Deni's team and appreciate that partnership, and as well as appreciate the technology that the other panelists here provide. So thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks very much, Tami. So perhaps, Kabir, we could hear a few words from you.
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Kabir Barday. I'm the CEO of OneTrust. My background is technical, although I hold a Fellow of Information Privacy with the IAPP, which is their highest designation for a privacy professional. And I sit on the advisory boards of groups like the Future of Privacy Forum, the Center of Information Policy, the IAPP, and a number of other data and security groups. And at OneTrust, we build a technology platform that's all about trust and how do we help organizations be more trusted and use trust as a competitive advantage. And that involves bringing together privacy, data security, data governance, ethics and compliance, and lots of different aspects of what it takes to be trusted. So thanks for having me today.
Thanks so much, Kabir. Amit, perhaps we could turn to you.
Thanks, Rahyab. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm personally honored to be here on this World Data Privacy Day. A World Bank's mission to eventually eradicate global poverty and bring about economic welfare is very near and dear to my heart as the CEO of Informatica. Now, Informatica is a trusted partner to global organizations, and we help bring about profound changes at the socioeconomical or societal levels, leading with data. We're leaders in our market, and obviously we are privileged to be serving great customers across the globe. And what we believe in is that we're at the forefront of what we call the data revolution, continuously innovating ourselves to be the leader in our markets, serving 85 of the top Fortune 100 companies, national and local governments, nonprofits, all of them who rely on us to help them solve their biggest problems facing them with the help of data. And you know, some of the few examples that actually warm my heart, where we've obviously made a difference with the help of data is, one, helping an agency like the FDA to accelerate the drug development by providing visibility into their global supply chain, or help the state in the East Coast next to you all hardest hit by the pandemic to help understand where their PPE is and getting the right PPE at the right location with the right people that needing it, and also helping in the vaccine rollout that's happening right now, and helping one of the largest pharma companies in the vaccine trial development process and now in the delivery. I firmly believe that data is the soul of all things happening around us, which we can call digital transformation, and data privacy is the nucleus of it. I'm thrilled and privileged to be here with all of you talking about data privacy today. Back to you, Rahyab.
Thanks so much, Amit, for that. Felix, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So I'm Felix van der Maele, co-founder, CEO of Collibra. It's great to be here. So Collibra is a data intelligence company. We started about 12 years ago as the first data governance vendor, and in that context work with all of the large banks worldwide with their governance programs. Since we've expanded into what we call data intelligence, which is a combination of governance, catalog, lineage, quality, and of course, privacy. And we really believe, and that's our vision, to empower every data citizen. And that means finding the right balance between the right of having easily accessible and trustworthy information, but also having the responsibility to treat that data correctly and in the right way. And of course, privacy is an enormous important aspect to that. So I'm very much looking forward to the session.
Well, thank you so much. It's exciting to have such a distinguished panel of technologists and development practitioners here today to take some of the questions that we have for you. So, Deni, perhaps we'll begin with you. I think our first question is related to the World Bank Group's mission, as we are promoting data for better lives, and we're also promoting data privacy. But these days, especially during the pandemic, some may believe that these two are at odds with one another. So could we hear from you a little bit in terms of your thoughts on the balance between privacy and bettering lives using data?
Thank you, Rahyab. Well, it's a great question. It's a great debate. When looking at the World Bank, I always look at the bank and people do not always understand what the World Bank is doing. It's not only financing. I always look at the bank as providing advice to our client countries on how to tackle extreme poverty and increasing shared prosperity. It's a very lofty goal. And to achieve this goal, I see our assets in three main categories. The first one is our staff, the knowledge that they have. Second big category that we have is the data that we're going to talk about today. So data is absolutely key, to unlock and help our staff to find the best development solutions for our clients. And the third one is the financing. Often the bank, people think about the financing first, but I see it almost as a mean to allow to be involved in policy decision, policy recommendation at the country level. So on the data side, it's absolutely exploding. I think nobody needs to, I'm not informing you of something new here. It's absolutely exploding. So I think the importance of the data privacy, it's absolutely key. And I'm really proud that starting next week, we started to work on this 2 years ago. We're starting the implementation of the World Bank Group data privacy policy, which is basically providing us the guardrail that Julie Brills from Microsoft was giving us, telling us earlier. So when you have this guardrail to protect, of course, the privacy, the dignity of people, the individual. So now we have the guardrail to innovate within these guardrail. So another very important element as well is the cybersecurity, which traditionally was to prevent intrusion, foreign intrusion, data leaks, and so on. But today it has also a very important role in protecting data privacy, making sure that we protect this information. So I like the new principle that we have put in place, and the technology, the ITS, which is the information technology services that we provide to the World Bank Group, is basically involved in all elements of the data privacy strategy. So it's a great debate. We also have to recognize that not everybody has the same tolerance when they look at the data privacy policy. So they conduct a survey, and some people do not really care about information being collected on themselves, and some others, they care much more. So there's also a survey that indicate that very few people understand the data privacy laws. Very few people understand how data is being used as well. So I think we have a huge mandate in front of us, not only to implement these new data privacy policies, but also to explain to people what are their rights and how can they have access to information and so on. So I'm just pleased that to partner with Tami, the Data Privacy Office, and also the other DPO for MIGA and IFC and EXID across the World Bank Group to make sure that we will be able to continue to innovate, maximize the use of our data while protecting the privacy and dignity of this information.
Thank you very much, Deni. Deni, perhaps we could ask a related question, which is more broadly around how do you feel technology has helped governments better manage their response to the pandemic in general? We heard from Amit a little bit about how he feels that we can contribute to the vaccines and to the pipeline. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, and I think how technology has been used to respond to COVID has varied a lot around the world, and we do not have all the same, let's say, take on how far we can go, and this again we have to be respectful of the different approach to it, but we have to be conscious that we should not go too far in making sure that we provide the best public good, provide the best response to countries. And sometimes it's absolutely necessary in time of crisis, because now we are in the time of a crisis, which is not only a health crisis, but it's an economic crisis. I think we have regressed, unfortunately, a lot in our fight against poverty. And I think some collection of data would be more justified in time of crisis. But the danger sometimes is that when you go back to normal, that, sorry, my phone is ringing at the same time. I don't know if you hear it. I had to turn it down. So I was saying that there is a danger when you go a little bit too far during a time of crisis, that all this technology stays in place and become too invasive, intrusive, and are being misused for the future. So it's, I think we need to, I love this debate. I don't think I have the perfect answer. Nobody has it. But it's through debate that we will be able to find the right delicate balance between the use of technology and protecting people's rights. So at the end, we can use the word misuse in two ways. We need to make sure that the personal data will not be misused. At the same time, we should make sure that we will not misuse of the information. We will not miss the opportunity to use the information for the right purposes. So I invite you all to engage into this debate. We're about to start the implementation of our policy in the World Bank Group, and it will require adjustments, that's for sure. And at the end of the day, we'll try our best to reach the best balance in protecting individual rights and public goods.
Thank you, Deni. I like the way you point out the need for balance. So perhaps, Tami, we could ask you a question, the next question. And I think this is related to increasingly, as we've seen, more and more of our personal data is available online. The pandemic has sort of highlighted some of these things. We read about big tech in the news every day now. So how do you see the field of data privacy evolving in response? Do you think we're going to see more regulation? Will companies have to implement more stringent controls to protect personal data? What do you see as the future in this area?
Thanks, Rahyab. I think we are going to see coming out of COVID-19 a perfect storm, and we will be developing the tools and the uses of personal data in a way that we could not have imagined. So prior to the pandemic, I never would have dreamt that I would be sharing my symptoms, my diagnoses, who I've been in contact with on a regular basis, whether I've been vaccinated. So this is all just resetting the concept of privacy. Privacy has obviously been a concept recognized since the beginning of man, but we are at a turning point here where, in order to meet the requirements of mitigating the effects of COVID-19, we are necessarily using personal data, again, in a way that we never would have expected. coming out of 2020 as well, I'm struck by what the chief executive of Microsoft has said. Satya Nadella says that what we've witnessed over the last year is the dawn of a second wave of digital transformation sweeping every company and every industry. And I think that's spot on, because we are now living completely digitally. We're working, we're socializing, we're being educated, we are having doctor's visits, everything we're doing is digital. And so necessarily, we will have to adjust and make sure that we're doing so in a privacy-forward, responsible fashion. One of the examples of the technology shift are the evolution of contact tracing apps or exposure notification apps. We saw the partnership between Google and Apple, where they put an unprecedented partnership, and they have put forth a privacy-forward, very successful contact tracing exposure notification app for us to use. So that's one technology innovation that's come out of this perfect storm that we see with COVID-19 and personal data. I think we're going to continue to see that. You asked about regulation. I think that we will continue to see the evolution of regulation. More and more countries either are implementing or are updating their regulation on the use of personal data. That has to continue. It has to keep up with the technology. It also has to reflect the balance that we need. Deni used the word balance. That is so critically important, because we don't want to stifle innovation and we don't want to preclude the use of personal data, but we have to make sure that we're putting in place, again, what Julie Brill said, the guardrails, so that we have the expectations, both with regulation, with enforcement, with public pressure, with encouraging business models that continue this digital evolution, but in a way that is privacy forward and privacy protective. Again, I think last year was a watershed moment for privacy, and I think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be, we're going to see sweeping changes, both in attitudes and approaches. And I think the companies in the private sector that are using privacy forward are going to gain the most respect, and hopefully will be the survivors in our capitalist economy.
Thanks so much, Tami. That was great. And I think you touched on a couple of topics, the notion of digital transformation, as well as the need for continued innovation and to not stifle that. I think that's a great segue perhaps to you, Kabir, and perhaps in your role as a CEO of a technology company, you could speak a little bit about how you see the changes in terms of rapid adoption of the cloud, data moving to the cloud, social media. How do you see businesses responding to incorporate innovations, to adapt to what's next in this space?
Yeah, and I really like how Tami described the second wave of digital transformation, and it happened so quickly, and it's still happening, where years and years and years of digital transformation got accelerated in months to facilitate the work from home, to facilitate remote employees. And remember, in parallel, you still have these major trends of AI and machine learning happening that requires agility and more data collection to train these algorithms. And the key for most organizations is those initiatives are happening for usually very good reasons. You're supporting these health use cases, you're supporting these economic use cases. So the key with privacy and the underlying technology that supports privacy programs is, how do you facilitate that speed? How do you facilitate that agility and be a business partner without really detrimentally slowing that down with process and reviews and data analysis? And so that's really where we're seeing the biggest trends in how privacy programs and how technology is used changing. And there's really three big trends we're seeing. The first is, you have to think about not just privacy in a silo, but what are all these operational risk review activities that are happening. You know, the common phrase in privacy is privacy by design. You have to review privacy in the beginning, but that's not the only by design. I'm sure organizations deal with. You have security by design, you have ethics by design, you have all of these different by design. When you say by design, that means you have to hook into business processes. You need to hook into your IT reviews, your finance reviews, your marketing reviews. You don't want to have to do that multiple times for multiple risk review processes. So the key for the agility in that digital transformation is bringing together trust as a concept, not privacy, not data governance, not security, not ethics, but trust, and having it implemented and operationalized one time. That's a major trend we're seeing in how these all fit together. I would say the second is a lot of privacy programs started with thinking about compliance. And luckily, most privacy programs have evolved to think more about risk than compliance and contextual risk for the organization. Now, when you start thinking about AI and machine learning, even a risk-based approach becomes awkward, because what is risk of an algorithm that's changing and adapting as more data is fed into it? And so how do we use privacy programs and privacy technology to take a data ethics approach? And a great example of this is we have a customer that used to do what's called a privacy impact assessment, where you do a privacy review of how are you legally collecting data, why are you collecting data, and you go through that. And it was great, but they found that it didn't work for AI and machine learning in these modern programs, and it was hard for the business to understand. So they started doing what they call a human impact assessment, and they would review what are the potential bad things that could happen if things got way out of hand. If all of our constituents, stakeholders, board members, the public, your mother, if they knew what we were doing with data, would they be proud of it? Would they be happy about it? And it causes this different perspective on ethical analysis of what you're doing. And that's another big trend to support these AI and digital transformation initiatives. And the third is maybe obvious, but it's automation. In terms of supporting businesses and the velocity of business projects that need to be reviewed and analyzed and the pace they need to, there has to be deeper automation and data discovery and things like redaction and things like using aggregate data sources across privacy reviews and data governance reviews across industry, and using those to form heuristics on maybe preliminary approvals. It's like your pre-qualification letter when you apply for a loan in privacy to let the business start moving forward while you do deeper reviews. So all of those things are key trends we're seeing to support that speed and agility in the latest environment for businesses.
Thanks very much, Kabir. Great points. So perhaps, Amit, we could shift gears a bit and speak a little bit about inclusion when it comes to data. There's still a great divide between the data haves and the data have-nots, if you will. So do you have any advice for organizations and for countries as they try to become more data-driven in this post-pandemic world while still protecting the privacy of the data that they do collect?
Indeed, Rahyab. I'll go back and connect with what Tami, you were saying. I totally agree. Look, we firmly believe that the scale of digital transformation, especially in the last year, as Satya said, has accelerated. And as I said before, data is the soul of digital transformation, and all the conversation we are having around is how do we manage the data? How do we make sure it's more valuable, which is tied to the question you're saying. And by the way, we are great partners with Microsoft. We firmly believe in that. We were the data and analytics partner of the year with them last year. So totally agree with that. Now, I genuinely believe that every organization, every country, county, wherever you go, is sitting on a wealth of data. It's existed before, and digital transformation is accelerating the creation of that data. And I think the fundamental difference between the data haves and the have-nots is a conscious choice. Whether you want to understand or leverage your data for, three primary purposes: for the greater good, to serve your key stakeholders, whosoever they may be, and to be candid, to improve people's lives at a macro level across the globe. And that's what sets you apart as a data-driven organization, whether you're for profit, you're not for profit, you're a government, whatever you are. And there's tons of benefit. I mean, look, some stats I can tell you, look, 65% of high-performing organizations apply to what Kabir was saying, AI-powered data-driven decision-making. And 81% of business leaders today across the globe rate data as being the most valuable thing for their long-term success. So my advice to all the leaders who are trying to evolve their organizations to become a data-driven one is you won't move it overnight, but you have to think of it philosophically. And I'll give you 3 key pillars. One is begin first with managing your data management. It's all about discovery, understanding, and integrating all the wealth of data you have. I spend a lot of time with my peers, CDOs, CIOs, some of them who are here on this panel. They're all sitting on a gold mine of data, but it's dispersed across the organization in thousands and thousands of silos. How can you possibly unleash the power of data and create valuable insights and make better decisions when you're challenged by the very limitation of not being able to bring it together? So invest in a holistic platform that helps you discover, profile data, integrate it, create deeper understanding and context across your organization. So making data accessible with data management is the first step. Second, and a discussion we're having today is data governance and privacy. I'll broaden it a little bit. This is the holy grail of efficient data management. And in the world of cloud, by the way, it becomes even more important. Data privacy is what, by the way, keeps the entire C-suite awake at night across the globe, everybody I talk to. The last thing you need in your digital transformation journey is any risk to your sensitive data. And we were talking about when we were getting ready as a panel about PII data, and there's so many things that an organization can deem sensitive. It may not be tied to regulatory compliance. Governance, data governance, I think, is the safety seatbelt to ensure you have when you're on this highway or the autobahn of digital transformation. It's not just documenting policies, it's about enabling them in the very fabric of your data foundation, whether you call it by design or strategic thinking. And the one word I hear from every customer of ours who talks to us is why they choose us is this word trust. Make sure the ones that you partner with, you can rely on because your most important asset is your data. And lastly, it's all about democratizing data. The real magic begins, and to what Felix, you were saying, when you unleash it, let everybody access after you've governed it, made it available, you put the right culture, right process, right technology, right foundation to make sure whether you are managing a supply chain initiative, a customer experience, a finance, whatever it is, unleash it, let everybody have access to it with the right privacy, governance, foundation behind it. It's not just an IT decision, it's a holistic organization transformation. To me, that's the holistic way I think about how to go from being a data have-not to a data-first, data-have company. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Amit. I like that holistic perspective that you're endorsing. So, Felix, perhaps we could hear from you a little bit on just building on that things coming together theme. So in the past, data governance has been fairly focused on managing data and improving the quality of that data. And now there's a lot of focus on data privacy, including the rights for individuals to have control over their own data. But really, these two fields are converging. So what are your thoughts on this convergence and how data governance can help enable and put in place the protections that we require for data privacy?
Yes, absolutely. And it looks like there's a lot of consensus here amongst the panel that we're seeing that convergence. I think it's very, very logical. We'd go one step further. From our perspective, we highly recommend it. And I think from a privacy perspective, step one was often organizations focusing on more of the consumer-facing aspects of privacy, where that's cookie consent, consumer portals, these types of things. But the more organizations we are talking to, they quickly started to realize that it really needs and requires a more fundamental, a foundational understanding of data. And again, to what many of us have said before here already, it's ultimately about trust. And if you think about what's the value proposition of data governance, it's about trusting data. What's the importance around data privacy? It's again about trusting data. So that trust is such a critical component. And if you think about what data governance actually is, how do you get there? It's very similar to what you need with respect to data privacy. You need to understand what data you have. Going back to Amit, what you said around data management, if you have 10,000 of sources of data, if you don't know where your data is, how it looks like, where it is stored, what's actually in there, who has access, it becomes really problematic. It's understanding how that data flows to your organization. It's understanding who's responsible. And these are all the same things you need to do for governance as well as privacy. And so from our perspective, you really want to take a foundation, almost like a platform approach to both governance and privacy, because the work you have to do is very similar. 70, 80% probably is the same. And yes, from a governance perspective, you need to then manage policies. These could be quality policies, these could be privacy policies, access policies, but you always want to be able to bring that back to that foundational platform. And that's something that we're hearing a lot of our customers do as they build that governance foundation. Now they want to really integrate their data privacy activities onto that foundation. Because very quickly you're going to see that your privacy teams are going to work closely with your governance teams, and your governance teams are going to work closely with your privacy team. So you really want to bring that together, because ultimately, in my view, it's all about collaboration. I think over the last 10 years, we've invested so much money and attention in infrastructure for data, bigger scale, more volume, higher processing. But I think what's really the critical aspect here that we have to solve is really the people and process aspect. And we ultimately believe that data is inherently human. It is chaotic, it is diverse. A lot of the strength in the data comes from its diversity, and we have to embrace that. We don't have to try to homogenize all of the data, we have to try to harmonize it so it works together well. We have to find kind of a shared language where people actually understand the data, can actually leverage the data to get true value from that data. And so that's why data governance, data privacy are so foundational. And also to then tie back to another really important aspect is it's ultimately important, privacy and governance from a risk management and compliance perspective, but ultimately it's also how can it accelerate that shift towards digital transformation, because that's what we're going through. And again, if you take a foundational and platform approach, the work you're doing from a data governance and data privacy perspective, if you do it well, is going to create leverage to make sure that every data workflow that you have can be done more quickly, more automated, to Kabir's point. And so you're going to get to outcomes faster. And it actually, it's not just about risk management, it's really about accelerating that shift towards digital transformation while having the right guardrails in place.
Thanks so much, Felix, and to all of you. I think it's really nice to see some common themes emerging in terms of the role that technology can play in as it pertains to data privacy. So it's really good to see that. So perhaps maybe another round of maybe somewhat more specific questions, and maybe Kabir, we could begin with you. So the question here is really around, based on you have so much experience now working with so many different organizations on privacy. So what would you think would be the key success factors for a global organization such as the World Bank Group in implementing its own data privacy program? Perhaps you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think one of the common themes from Amit, Felix, and myself was trust, and even Tami mentioned it. And the reason that word trust is so important is because it changes the conversation from just compliance and risk reduction to how can we be valuable to the business? Because trust is a very valuable asset, hard to gain, easy to lose. And so the key success we start to see in a large organization like World Bank is, how do you start to measure privacy's impact on trust? And how do you start to measure the competitive differentiation and the business value you've created? And it's a different way of thinking about the success criteria of a privacy program than is traditionally done at smaller, more tactical privacy programs, where smaller organizations might think about, how many privacy requests did I get on my website? How many privacy reviews did? They're volume-based metrics, not value-based metrics. And so we start to see organizations that are really thinking about value and trust start to measure different things. So for example, because we've built such a sophisticated privacy program that's so automated, we're able to collect more data. And we're able to use more data respectfully. And maybe we've anonymized it or sampled it, or we're collecting location, but instead of collecting precise latitude and longitude, we're collecting postal code level information, but now we're able to collect more of it more easily because we don't have to get consent for every piece of it, or we're more easily getting consent. So how do you tie it to that? And then the outcomes from generating more of that data, all the things that Amit talked about, which are, you have all these big problems, either macroeconomic or for your own stakeholders, that you're starting to solve. So how do you measure the fact that you've done privacy well and you've had an impact directly on those end outcomes are really interesting things that we start to see larger organizations start to think about. Other simple examples are, things like we're able to onboard and work with a more diverse set of vendors more quickly. A lot of organizations, because of privacy and the overhead of some of these things, are actually starting to work with fewer numbers of vendors, which isn't great for competition. It's not great for the technology ecosystem. So how can you show that you're actually able to work with more vendors faster and have a better handle on them because you have such a thorough and automated program? How do you show that when a business function supports a request to your privacy team? You approve 95% of them. You're not slowing people down. You're approving them. You're approving them on a certain schedule. Now, of course, some have contingencies and things to do to follow up, but showing this different type of metric, that's the key that we see from really world-class privacy programs like the World Bank's.
Thank you, Kabir. I really like that that notion of the business value of good data privacy practices speaking for themselves. So perhaps, Amit, we could turn to you. And I know you've mentioned in the past, I've read some of your work on the use of machine learning and AI as an enabler, given the spread of data and the fact that, for example, the World Bank is a very federated organization. We have data everywhere. So could you speak a little bit as to what role you see machine learning and AI and some of these emerging technologies playing in data governance and data privacy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I think to your question, AI/ML is absolutely accelerating, and it's a foundational part of all things we do with data. But the question that you asked, I do think that the federated model is becoming a much more important requirement for all organizations globally. Definitely all the large organizations, commercial or non-commercial. And federated governance and privacy is all about bringing together people, process, and technology. And what AI and ML we feel, and our AI is called Claire, allows you to be more clairvoyant, as you can see. It strengthens the bond of all three, people, process, technology, to make a federated governance and privacy program very effective. Now, you, World Bank, are a great example. And the many organizations that operate globally have various governance and privacy rules across different countries or locations. And they may have specific privacy regulations that apply to different business units in those orgs. And that there are three aspects generally that we believe are important to operating an AI-powered federated model very successfully. And number one in that is AI-powered data understanding. Look, the very foundation of a federated model is an authoritative, trusted, and complete metadata. See, AI and ML need data to learn, and a federated model means that there's different sources and versions of same data types. The metadata foundation extracts both data and the meaning from those sources, and for example, lineage, and manages it in a central metadata foundation, leaving the data wherever it is. And then you can catalog things like data sources and so on and so forth. And then you can apply AI ML on top of it. And then you can deliver what I call understanding at scale, because you're now inferring schemas and relationships and so on and so on. So again, that gives you the first step, what is called AI-driven data understanding. Then is AI-driven data collaboration. Now, there are many roles that are involved in federated data governance: stewards, architects, engineers, data engineers, citizen integrators, citizen analysts, data scientists, and I can keep going on and on and on. What AI/ML processes enable is greater collaboration among those roles to discovering, governing, and providing data across the organization. So collaboration can be a lot collaborative, if I may. And then to start, the AI/ML processes make recommendations for each type of data user, such as identification and masking of sensitive data, or anomaly detections, and recommended remediation. Extremely important. AI/ML can also be applied to aid the collaboration process itself, learning patterns required to govern and approve data usage and automating those processes. And the value of AI and ML is time and cost. Look, the sheer volume of data governance decisions that can be automated based on ML is impressive if you see it running at scale. We have many clients that have automated millions of these decisions, using AI and ML. And the third one I go back again to is AI-powered consumption, tied to my data democratization point before. Takes it a step forward. Democratization of data in a federated model is key, but complex, because you need the governance rules and actions and the access to data that may vary by different geography, different businesses, different locations. So consumption to us is about empowering another group of data users, ones that may be very less technical, citizen analysts or business users. These users need fit-for-purpose experiences. They want to shop for data and use it on demand, and things like through a marketplace. So the usage and rules of data access and sharing can be learned through AI and ML. So ultimately, the value of an AI ML is that it makes this federated governance or privacy model achievable by fully automating the data pipe from understanding, collaboration to consumption. And I'll wrap up by saying this. Look, I think the World Bank is a great role model for a lot of organizations across the globe who are federated or are aspiring to be federated on how to manage data privacy while adhering to some stringent regional country-specific requirements and compliance regulations. So as technology providers, we continuously innovate how we help large global federated organizations reap the benefits of trusted data, while most importantly, as everybody said here, safeguarding and addressing all of governance and privacy requirements. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Amit. I like the way that you're providing advice that is very practical for organizations. So Felix, perhaps in the same vein, we could turn to you. And you spoke earlier today about the convergence between data governance and data privacy. Do you have any advice for organizations who are beginning this journey? I mean, how should they set up some of this data governance and data privacy so that they are mutually reinforcing?
Absolutely, and it all depends, of course, how far you are in your data governance journey. As talked about earlier, the model, whether federated, centralized, it's very much lied to the culture and the strategy of every organization. But I'd say, and always in data governance, it's really important to start with the use case. What problem are you actually solving, and scope really well. It's easy to lose yourselves because, as we've talked about, the data landscape is incredibly vast. There's so many use cases that you can find yourself focusing on, and we believe focus is important. So from that perspective, look at privacy as a real use case. Reach out to your privacy teams, collaborate really closely, and always ask yourselves, how can you make their life easier? How can they leverage the work that you've already done, the foundations you've already provided? That's always a great way to start, and make sure you have a fully integrated approach. If you think about policies, like I said, there can be privacy policies. They're often linked to access policies. They're linked to quality policies. If you think about data discovery, what kind of work have you done already to identify where PII data is? How can you leverage your catalog that you created so you know where the metadata is, where all the different data sets are? And so I think you can become a real partner to the data privacy team. And I'd say it's always ultimately about collaboration between teams. And so just having that perspective, how can I help make your life easier, is a really good way to go about it.
Thanks a lot, Felix. So perhaps, Deni, we could turn to you. The bank group has just embarked on our data privacy program. So from a technology perspective, how do you see our technology landscape evolving over the next few years to continue to support the bank's business priorities around privacy?
Oh, thanks for the question, Rahyab. First, because I was very interested by the comments that Amit and Felix and Kabir mentioned. I really like the value-based metrics. And I also very interested to learn more about the human impact assessment, which I think Silicon Valley could have applied in the past to their own innovation, because I think technology is great. I think can solve most of our problems on the planet. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of thought being put into really assessing the impact of these innovations. Just look at the impact of, for example, social platform has had in Myanmar on minorities, and you will understand everything that the bad and the good that technology can bring. So this human impact assessment, something to explore. I like the concept a lot. So Rahyab, on the technology side, I think Tami came in 2 years ago and We partner with her, of course, on the technology side to be able to support the program. We have a World Bank Group policy now, directive, and more to come with the policy becoming into force next week. So we have put in place a lot of technology now to support the program, actually using some of our colleagues here, Collibra technology, Informatica, OneTrust technology, and other technology that we already have. So we have, I think, a very good foundation. So moving forward, I think we're entering this phase of implementation. So we'll see. There's also a huge learning phase. I understand, Kabir, when you say let's focus on value-based metrics, but the nuts and bolts are required to build the trust. This automated process has to be put in place, and we need to focus on that a lot to build that trust that will allow us not only to protect the moral obligation to protect data privacy, but also the business needs, right, for us to be able to maximize this use of data. So one element I think we still need to work on. So we put the process in place, system in place for a privacy impact assessment, the data subject access request, same thing for the processing, privacy breach response, and so on. Data model have been put in place, discovery, mapping, disposition, all of this like foundational work has been put into place. So let's see how implementation will go. And we also have to focus, put a little bit more focus moving forward, I think, in third-party assessment, because we work with a lot of partners across, and we will be as good as our partners are good. So we have tons of partners, and we have to make sure that not only us, we do a good job, but all our partners are doing a good job to build that trust, which is so essential for client countries all around the world to be trusting us and giving them advice and using their own data, and also helping them establish their own data privacy program all around the world. So I think we're in a good place. And so let's see in a few months how things are going. And as I said, we will make some mistake. We will adjust and move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Deni. Well, the good thing is we've got a bunch of good technology partners working with us, so that's great. Tami, maybe we could just in the same vein, we could ask you. You've seen some of the capabilities of the technology that we're using at the World Bank to support the privacy program, and you've heard from all these CEOs. So in your opinion, what kinds of innovations do you think would be the most helpful for global organizations such as ours to help us roll out our privacy roadmaps?
Thanks, Rahyab. I'm gonna latch onto the word that keeps coming up, and it's trust, and that is incredibly important to the bank, not just because we want stakeholders to trust us, but we don't adhere to any particular regulation. So everything that we're doing is without tying to GDPR or CCPA or any other regulation that's in place. So the challenge is that there is no blueprint to do this when there is no overarching country or region regulation that we have to tie to. So our challenge is to often we have to adjust a program or a product that is a great product, but it ties to the requirements of a GDPR or the Brazil requirements. And so I would challenge the technology side to think about other international organizations like us, other development banks, the United Nations, other organizations that fall into this category of we want to do the right thing. We want to do this because it's the right thing to do, not because we have a regulator breathing down our neck, but we want to do this for the trust. So I would challenge you to keep that in mind. It might not be always appropriate or relevant, but when I joined and we started this journey, there really isn't anything that isn't tied directly to the requirements of regulations. So that being said, the technology that your three companies provide is incredible. We started this process using spreadsheets and manually, walking around and trying to collect information for our gap analyses. It was incredibly cumbersome. So being able to facilitate this with a technological solution it's a game changer, as well as the data discovery and other tools that we can use to respond to data subject requests and others, as well, and to demonstrate our compliance. So it really was a game changer to implement these tools. My only ask would be maybe think broader if you are able to, and there's a good market, I'm sure, for your tools in this unique space of international organizations.
Thanks so much, Tami. And thank you to all of our panelists for these very insightful answers and discussion. We have received some questions from our audience, but in the interest of time, I think we'll probably respond in writing after the fact. So I'd like to welcome Clay as to provide some closing remarks for the panel. Thank you, Clay.
Thank you, Rahyab, and thank you for all the panels for such an interesting and lively discussion. If I may, I would like to summarize what I have learned today by 3 R's and under the grand scheme of the pandemic. So the first R is resets. As you know, the pandemic has resets perspective, relationship, and opportunity. So Tami, you just said you have never thought that you would turn over and share your medical data. So our perspective of our privacy changed because of the pandemic. And many of you talk about relationship. Obviously, this pandemic has reset our relationship with many things. We have to keep social distancing. We have to be concerned about safety and health. And then it resets opportunities. What used to be working are no longer working. So it brings about new opportunities. And the next R is reshape. So we just heard about, Satya said, the technology landscape, the digital transformation, the second waves. So it's reshaping the technology landscape. And it also reshapes the balance of influences. So Deni talked about we as a development institution, we work with many clients. What used to be silo cannot be working anymore. And it also resets our approach. So we cannot do this individually. Felix talked about collaboration and also an adding value approach to do things. So it's very clear this has been reshaped. And the last R I want to mention is about rebuild. So Deni talked about there has been a huge regress of economy. So we have to rebuild the loss of economy momentum. We have to rebuild the trust. We have to rebuild the supply chain. Now, here comes the point that every panelist has made. It's using data. Now we're seeing an opportunity to rebuild or restrike the balance between the use of data and the implication of privacy. And I'm very glad that we have this opportunity to learn together and kind of walk along this journey. As you know, World Bank Group is a development institution. So we love to share our journey and our experiences with our client and for the common good. So I want to take the opportunity to thank every one of you for such a learning opportunity. Back to you, Rahyab.
Thanks so much, Clay. Thanks for summarizing that so nicely with the 3 R's. So I think we're right on time. So I'd also like to extend my thanks to everybody who participated, Deni, Tami, Clay, Sukwa, Kabir, Amit, and Felix. It's been a wonderful conversation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And with that, we will say goodbye.